Have you ever wondered how a single canceled plan can change the entire course of a life? He thought his blind date had simply fallen through until he walked across that quiet parking lot and saw a mother sitting on the pavement, holding back tears while her children clung to her side. In that moment, everything he believed about timing, fate, and second chances began to shift. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? The evening had settled gently over Middlebury, laying a soft golden wash across the rooftops and the familiar brick storefronts the way autumn always did in this part of Vermont. Rowan Hale stepped out of his old Subaru Forester and took a moment to breathe in the scent of wood smoke drifting from a nearby chimney. The crisp air carried a promise of the coming cold. Along with that quiet comfort, older Vermonters always spoke of the kind found only in small towns where the night seemed to rest instead of rush. Morgan Tavern glowed at the end of the block, its warm windows casting amber light onto the sidewalk. Rowan stared at it for a moment, fingers tightening around his jacket collar. It wasn't nerves exactly, just the weight of trying again, the weight of showing up for something tender. The tavern had been around forever, a place where farmers, teachers, and retirees mingled without fuss. He'd chosen it because it wasn't flashy, and it didn't pretend. It was honest, steady, the kind of place a man like him could sit without feeling like he needed to be someone he wasn't. Inside, the hostess greeted him with a familiar nod. "Evening, Rowan? Table for two tonight?" "That was the plan," he answered with a modest smile. He followed her to a small table by the window, the kind where conversation stayed soft and warm. He slid into the booth, smoothing the sleeves of his button-down shirt wrinkles only he would notice. Habits passed down from a mother who believed in doing things with quiet care. Rowan had grown up in small rituals like that. The tavern hummed softly, silverware clinking. Low conversations, the muted chatter of a local news anchor on the TV mounted near the bar. The kind of domestic sound that made a man think of dinners long past, evenings when life felt simple. His chest tightened at the memory of home, of his mother stirring soup, his father fixing something in the garage, the warmth that used to occupy the spaces his adult life had left empty. He rested his hands on the wooden table. A single candle flickered between him and the empty seat across from him. He took in a slow breath. Marin Whitlock, a name their mutual friend had said warmly, with the kind of encouragement people gave when they truly hoped two lonely lives might brush against one another. Rowan wasn't the kind to chase romance on a whim. Grief had taught him to move gently, to raise his hopes slowly, and lower them even slower. But he had agreed to tonight. He had even ironed his shirt, something he hadn't bothered with in months. He checked his watch once, and then again a minute later, though he pretended he wasn't keeping track. He told himself she was simply running late, and perhaps she was. Life could turn people around 2 or 3 times before they arrived anywhere. He ordered only water. Waiting felt easier that way. His phone vibrated quietly on the table. He reached for it quickly, too quickly, maybe hope flickering across his expression in a way he would never admit aloud. The message was short. "I'm sorry. I can't make it." For a long moment, Rowan didn't move. The words didn't sting. They simply settled across his heart with a quiet, familiar heaviness like a door gently closing. He stared at the message, absorbing it the way a man absorbs a small disappointment after a long season of larger ones. He nodded to himself, a gesture so small most people wouldn't see it, a nod of acceptance, a nod of a man who didn't fault her, a nod of someone who understood that life rarely bowed to the evenings we hope for. The waitress approached with a sympathetic tilt of her head. "You all right, hon?" Rowan offered a polite smile. "Happens." She left the check without prying small-town courtesy in its purest form. He added a tip out of simple habit, shrugging into his jacket with the quiet dignity of someone used to carrying his disappointments privately. Outside, the air felt cooler, brushing against him like a soft reminder that fall was slipping deeper into the valley. Shop windows flicked off one by one. A couple crossed the street with bags of groceries. The world moved on the way it always did. Rowan headed toward his car, but something a tug beneath his ribs, subtle but insistent, made him slow his steps. He had meant to go home, heat up leftover stew, and let the night drift into silence. But instead, he paused. A feeling not loud, not clear, but present whispered that he wasn't meant to leave yet. Older folks in town called it a nudge from the good Lord. Rowan didn't know if he believed that, but he respected instinct. He turned the corner toward the parking lot. It was quiet back here, quiet in that deep, small-town way that allowed a man to hear his own heartbeat. Leaves scraped softly across the pavement. A distant train horn echoed over the hills, stitched into the fabric of the valley like a familiar lullaby. Rowan walked slowly, hands in his pockets, letting the night settle around him. This side of the tavern held memories too, helping his father jump a neighbor's car here one winter, sharing a laugh with an old friend after a softball game, watching the snow pile up in silent drifts after closing time. He had just begun to turn toward his Subaru when he heard it. A sound, soft, broken, the kind of quiet sob someone makes when they're trying not to be heard. Rowan's chest tightened instinctively. He listened. There it was again, a trembling breath, followed by a muffled hiccup. Not the cry of someone hurt physically, the kind of sound made by a heart carrying too much. He turned toward the far end of the lot, and then he saw them. A woman sitting on the ground beside an older SUV, her knees tucked close, shoulders shaking. Two small children huddled beside her, one leaning gently against her arm, the other clutching at her coat. For a second, Rowan simply stood still, breath caught in his throat as the warm light of the lamppost spilled over them. And then, recognition hit him like a soft, stunned blow. He knew that face, even streaked with tears, even half hidden in her hands. Marin Whitlock, the woman he was supposed to meet tonight. And for a moment, time held its breath. Rowan didn't move, didn't speak. He simply stood there under the lamppost, the autumn night wrapped around him, realizing that his evening, quiet, ordinary, predictable, had just shifted in a way he never could have imagined. Rowan took another step into the dim stretch of the parking lot, letting his eyes adjust to the softer light beneath the last lamppost. The figure he'd glimpsed became clearer. Now a woman folded in on herself, arms wrapped around her knees as though trying to keep the world from spilling over. Her long brown hair fell like a curtain around her face, hiding most of her features. But the trembling of her shoulders told him enough. Beside her, two small shapes sat quietly against the SUV, their legs drawn close, their heads tilted toward their mother in worried silence. One child, a boy who looked no more than 5, glanced up as Rowan approached. The boy's eyes were wide, soft, not frightened, just confused in the way children are when they sense something's wrong but don't understand why. Rowan slowed his steps, making sure his presence wasn't abrupt. Years of living in a small town had taught him how to approach gently, how to give people space when they were hurting. He knew enough to keep a respectful distance, stopping several feet away. "Evening," he said softly, the kind of greeting older folks around Middlebury used when passing someone on a porch or walking past a neighbor's yard. The woman didn't respond right away. She just pressed her face against her knees, breath hitching the way a person sounds when trying hard not to fall apart. The little girl beside her, maybe 4, with a tiny pair of butterfly sneakers, watched Rowan with a quiet, thoughtful curiosity. Children had a way of sensing someone's intentions before adults did. Rowan cleared his throat gently, lowering his voice even further. "Are you all right? Do you need anything?" He didn't finish the sentence because he wasn't sure what he could offer, only that he felt compelled to. The woman lifted her head at last. Tear tracks glistened across her cheeks, and for a moment she blinked in confusion before recognition dawned. Her breath caught. Rowan saw the flicker of shock, then embarrassment, sweep across her expression. She wiped at her cheeks quickly, as if trying to erase any sign of what he'd clearly already seen. "Oh," her voice wavered as she tried to sit up straighter. I'm so sorry." She shook her head, strands of hair falling over her forehead. "This must look awful. I'm sorry." Rowan raised a hand slightly, an instinctive gesture of reassurance. "You don't owe me an explanation," he said kindly, and he meant it. Whatever she was carrying, he could feel the weight of it from where he stood. The boy shifted closer to his mother, little hands clutching the sleeve of her jacket. "Mommy?" he whispered, peeking at Rowan again. This time, with less worry and more curiosity, Rowan offered the kids a small, polite smile, the kind that said, "You're safe, I promise." He'd never been the loud or boisterous type. Kids tended to sense that quiet kindness. The woman let out a shaky exhale, as though holding everything inside had finally become too heavy. "I didn't mean for you to see me like this," she murmured. "Tonight just got away from me." Rowan nodded, understanding more than he let on. Happens to the best of us. Before she could respond, the small girl looked up at Rowan, big eyes shining beneath the dim light, and stretched out one tiny hand toward him, as if she'd known him much longer than a minute. And that simple, silent gesture made Rowan's breath catch in his throat. Rowan lowered himself slightly, not fully kneeling, but easing down enough to meet the little girl's eye level. He didn't reach for her hand. He knew better than to move too fast around children, but he let his expression soften with the kind of warmth that came naturally to him. "Hi there," he said quietly, voice steady and reassuring. "Are you folks waiting for someone?" The girl didn't speak. Instead, she leaned subtly toward him, her fingers still hovering in the air, small and patient and trusting in a way only a child could be. The gesture settled something deep in Rowan's chest, something that had been restless for a long time. The woman, she still hadn't given her name, placed a gentle hand on her daughter's back. "Elowen," she said softly, almost apologetic. "Sweetheart, give him a minute." Her voice cracked again, the exhaustion threading through it, unmistakable. She brushed a hand beneath her eyes. "I'm sorry. She's usually shy. I don't know why she—" Rowan shook his head lightly. "It's all right. Kids know more than we think." He nodded toward the little boy. "And what's your name, buddy?" The boy straightened a bit, gripping his mother's sleeve. "Camden," he said, small but brave. "Nice to meet you both," Rowan replied, warmth threading through every word. The woman drew a long breath, then let it out slowly, trying to gather herself. "I promise I wasn't trying to make a scene out here." She pushed her hair behind her ear, hands trembling slightly. Everything tonight fell apart at once." Rowan offered a soft, understanding smile. "Happens to the best of us," he repeated gently. "Do you need help with anything? A phone call? A ride somewhere?" She shook her head quickly. No, you've already seen more than I meant for anyone to see." Her eyes flickered downward, ashamed. "I didn't want to burden anyone." "Least of all you." Rowan blinked, surprised. "Me?" She swallowed hard before answering. "Because you're Rowan Hale, the man I was supposed to meet inside, the one I canceled on." Her voice tightened. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do." He took a quiet breath, letting her words settle. So this was Maren Whitlock, the woman behind the polite messages, the hopeful plan for a simple evening that life had clearly refused to cooperate with. He felt no frustration, no disappointment, only the weight of what she must have been carrying. "You don't have to apologize," he said softly. "Looks like you've had a rough night." Maren nodded once too quickly and swiped at a new trail of tears she hadn't meant to shed. "Rough month," she whispered. "Rough year." The breeze swept through the lot then, stirring leaves around their feet, and Rowan felt something inside himself shift. A quiet understanding. A pull he didn't resist this time. He didn't step closer. He didn't reach out. He simply stayed steady, present, waiting for her to breathe again, waiting for her to feel safe enough to look up. And when she finally raised her eyes, raw and exhausted beneath the lamplight, he saw a woman trying desperately not to fall apart in front of a stranger. A mother holding herself together for two small children leaning against her side. He saw someone who had been strong for far too long. Before he could say anything, before he could even decide what the right words might be, Elowen's small hand reached toward him again, bridging the space he hadn't dared to cross. And in the quiet of that parking lot, under the soft yellow glow, her tiny fingers hovered close to his, as if she'd known him much longer than a few seconds. Rowan stood under the lamppost for a moment, letting the quiet settle. The little girl's hand hung in the air, not quite reaching for him, but not pulling away either, more curiosity than trust. He didn't take it. Instead, he offered a soft, steady smile, the kind meant to let a child know they were safe without asking for anything in return. The Vermont night deepened around them, cool and calm, and somewhere down Main Street a shop owner locked up with a gentle, familiar, "Night now." Maren drew a shaky breath and gathered her children close in that instinctive way mothers do after long, difficult hours. "Come here, honey," she whispered to Elowen, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Let's give the nice man some space." Elowen didn't cling. She simply tilted her head toward Rowan, studying him the way small children do when deciding if someone feels kind. Rowan cleared his throat lightly. "Listen," he said, voice calm. "You probably need someplace warm to sit for a bit. There's a diner down the street. Storm Cloud Diner. They stay open late. It might help." Marin hesitated. "I don't want to take up your whole evening. You must have plans." "Not anymore," Rowan replied with a small shrug. "And even if I did, helping someone get settled isn't exactly a hardship." Camden tugged on her sleeve, blinking tiredly. "Is it far, Mom?" "Just a minute or two," Rowan said, nodding toward the soft neon glow at the corner. "Close enough we can see it from here." Marin looked between the diner lights and the dark stretch of parking lot. She wasn't afraid of Rowan, he could see that. But she had the caution of someone who'd had to be careful for far too long. Even so, something in her expression softened, as though she no longer had the energy to turn down a bit of kindness. "I haven't been there in years," she murmured. "It's still the same," Rowan said. "Warm lights, good pie, and coloring menus. They're a hit with the local kids." "Huh." Camden perked up slightly at that, and even Aloan released a small breath, though she still stayed close to her mother's knee. Marin finally nodded. "All right, a place to sit would help." She rose slowly, steadying herself on the SUV door. Rowan stepped back, not hovering, just keeping a respectful distance. He watched her brush dust off Elowen's jacket and straighten Camden's collar with gentle, practiced hands. Even exhausted, she moved with quiet care. When they were ready, Rowan gestured toward the sidewalk. "It's just up this way. I'll walk a few steps ahead so you don't feel crowded." He meant it, but Camden shook his head. "Mom, can he stay by us?" Rowan blinked, surprised not by the request, but by how shyly the boy said it. "I can stay nearby," he said softly. "You just let me know if it's too close." And so they walked, not tightly together, but in a small, comfortable line. Marin in the middle, her children beside her. Rowan slightly to the side where they could still see him if they needed reassurance. Main Street was quiet at this hour, holding the same kind of stillness Rowan remembered from his childhood Sunday desserts after church, his mother humming, his father carrying leftovers wrapped in foil. He'd forgotten how comforting those simple memories were. Storm Cloud Diner glowed ahead of them, its windows warm and amber. When Rowan held the door open, he didn't usher them in, he simply waited. Marin stepped inside first, kids tucked close, and something in her posture loosened the moment the warm air met her shoulders. The diner was calm, ending its late-night shift. A couple of older men talked quietly at the counter. 2 teenagers shared milkshakes in a booth. The air smelled of buttered toast, strong coffee, and pie that had been warming for hours. Rowan guided them toward a corner booth. Marin sat with Elowen beside her. Camden slid into the opposite side, trying to appear braver than he felt. Rowan took the seat next to him but left space just enough to show he wasn't trying to take up room that wasn't his. A waitress approached with a sympathetic smile. "Evening, folks. Long day?" Marin flushed slightly. "Something like that." "Well, you're welcome to settle in. Let me grab coloring sheets for the kiddos." She returned with crayons, placing them gently on the table. Camden began drawing a little slower than most kids would, like he was easing into safety. Elowen copied him, scribbling careful lines but still glancing at Rowan from time to time. Unsure but not uncomfortable, Marin watched them quietly before looking at Rowan. "I didn't mean for you to get dragged into all this," she said, voice fragile at the edges. "You didn't drag me anywhere," Rowan replied. "I'm here because I want to be." She looked down, twisting her napkin between her fingers. "My babysitter canceled last minute. I thought I could manage the night alone. But everything hit at once." "It happens," Rowan said. "Life has terrible timing." Marin's eyes glistened not from drama, but from simple, real exhaustion. "I didn't want you to think I wasn't dependable, that I couldn't even show up properly. You showed up in the way life allowed you to," Rowan said gently. "That's enough." They sat in soft quiet until the waitress brought rolls and coffee. Rowan poured a cup for Marin, sliding it toward her. She wrapped both hands around it, grounding herself in its warmth. "I'm not used to people staying," she murmured. "Not when things get messy." "Maybe you've been carrying everything alone so long," Rowan said, "that you forgot you don't always have to." Before Marin could respond, Camden nudged a half-melted chocolate across the table, his silent way of saying thank you. Rowan picked it up with care, as though receiving something precious. Something gentle shifted between the 4 of them. A soft warmth settling in, not dramatic, not rushed, just real. And for the first time in a long time, all of them breathed a little easier. The diner had settled into its late evening hush, the kind that wrapped itself around conversations and softened them, as though the walls themselves understood the need for tenderness. By now, a few booths had emptied, leaving behind the faint scent of maple syrup and brewed coffee lingering in the air. Outside the windows, the street lamps glowed against the cooling Vermont night, catching small flakes of dust and turning them into drifting sparks. Rowan watched the children color quietly, while Maren held her coffee cup in both hands, drawing warmth from it the way someone might hold onto a small, steadying lifeline. The trembling that had overtaken her earlier in the parking lot had eased, but he could still see the remnants of exhaustion around her eyes. She wasn't someone who let herself unravel easily. It was clear she had learned to stitch herself back together quickly, even when it hurt. He rested his elbows lightly on the table. "You mentioned things falling apart," he said gently. "Only if you want to talk about it." Maren let her gaze drift toward her children before answering. Camden was focused on shading the wings of a cartoon bird, and Elowen drew slow, careful loops across her page. Seeing them safe and quiet seemed to loosen something inside her. She took a small, steadying breath. "It's been 3 years," she said, voice low. 3 years of trying to pretend I'm keeping everything together. Some days I do okay, and some days I feel like the whole world is just one missed babysitter away from collapsing." Rowan nodded slowly, letting her find her pace. "Grant walked out when Elowen was barely a year old," she continued. "No warnings, no explanations that made sense. Just gone." She swallowed hard, but even now, she didn't speak bitterly. It wasn't anger that lived there. It was the weight of surviving. "I took on 2 jobs, a morning shift at the bakery, and cleaning rental cabins out by the lake in the afternoons. I barely slept. I barely thought. I just did what had to be done." She paused, eyes glistening. "And tonight, when the babysitter canceled, I thought I could push through like always. But sitting in that parking lot with the kids in the back seat, all I felt was this terrible guilt. Like I should have been able to manage one simple night." Rowan felt something tighten in his chest. An ache, yes, but a quiet admiration too. "You're doing more than most people ever have to," he said gently. "You're raising 2 kids on your own. There's nothing simple about that." Maren brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, defeated. "It doesn't feel like enough most days." "You're here," Rowan replied. "They're safe. They're loved. That's more than enough." For a moment, she closed her eyes, allowing those words to settle in the cracks where doubt had lived for years. When she opened them again, Rowan saw a kind of fragile hope, surface tentative, but real. Camden glanced up then, his small voice breaking the heaviness. "Mommy, look, my dinosaur can fly now." He held up the colored drawing proudly, and Maren smiled in that soft way mothers do, warmed by their children even in the hardest moments. Elowen climbed halfway onto her mother's lap, tiny fingers curling into Maren's sleeve. Maren kissed the top of her daughter's head, whispering, "I'm okay, sweetheart." Her voice still trembled, but there was steadiness returning to it. Rowan watched quietly, hands folded in front of him, letting the warmth of the scene wash through him. There was something deeply familiar in it, not the exact image, but the feeling. He remembered his mother's hand, resting gently on his shoulder during long nights, when homework overwhelmed him. Remembered the soft, steady comfort of his father humming through the house as he closed up the hardware store for the day. He hadn't realized until recently how much he missed the feeling of belonging to small, ordinary moments like these. "You know," Rowan said softly, "you don't have to pretend you're made of steel." Maren's gaze lifted to him again. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't demanding. He was simply there, the way some people are when life teaches them to understand sorrow without being consumed by it. The children had begun to hum quietly to themselves now, Camden coloring the sky blue, Elowen switching to a soft yellow crayon. Their presence gave the table a kind of warmth Rowan hadn't felt in years, the sort that settled gently into the heart. Maren tightened her hold around her coffee cup once more. "Thank you," she whispered, "for sitting here, for not walking away." Rowan's voice was steady. "You needed someone. That's reason enough." And before he could say anything else, Elowen lifted her little drawing from the table slowly, carefully turning toward him with the same quiet certainty she'd shown in the parking lot. Her small hands holding something that would change the shape of the night. Elowen held the paper with both hands, as if it were something precious. The diner's soft lamplight spilled across the page, illuminating bright strokes of yellow, blue, and green, childlike, unsteady, full of feeling rather than precision. Rowan smiled instinctively at her seriousness, expecting the usual sun, house, or stray scribbles children her age often made. But when she lifted the drawing toward him, he felt the air shift. Just slightly. Just enough. He reached out slowly, not wanting to rush her, and took the paper with the carefulness of a man handling something fragile. Elowen's wide eyes stayed on his face, studying him with a kind of hopeful curiosity he didn't fully understand yet. Rowan turned the drawing toward the light. 4 figures. 4 stick figures. Round heads. Little hands touching. A tall one with short hair. A woman with long brown strands. 2 smaller ones holding tightly between them. And above all 4, a sun with sweeping lines bright, almost tender, shining over them as if blessing the little scene. Rowan's breath stilled in his chest. He stared at the picture longer than he meant to, the simple crayon lines gathering weight as they sank into him. Something warm, unexpected, unguarded rose through his ribs. Not shock, not confusion. Recognition. Wishfulness. A memory he hadn't realized he'd been starving for. Beside him, Camden leaned forward proudly. "That's us," he announced, pointing at the little figures one by one. "That's Mommy, and that's me, and that's Elowen." His finger hovered over the final figure. "And that's you." Rowan blinked slowly, once trying to make sense of the quiet tremor winding up his spine. Marin startled, color rushing to her cheeks. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, reaching to lower Camden's arm. "He didn't mean he was just drawing kids sometimes. I'm so sorry, Rowan." They get attached quickly but Rowan wasn't hearing her apology. He was still looking at the drawing, tracing its lines the way someone traces the outline of something they'd forgotten they once longed for. Not because the children saw him incorrectly, but because they had seen something he hadn't yet dared to name. He cleared his throat gently, forcing his voice to remain steady. "It's beautiful," he murmured, though the word felt far too small. Elowen's tiny face broke into a shy, glowing smile, eyes bright as if she'd been waiting for his approval. As if it mattered. And it did. More than he expected. Rowan folded the picture once, carefully, edges aligned, as though it were a fragile letter from long ago that deserved to be kept safe. He slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket without hesitation. "I'll keep this," he said softly. "If that's all right." Both children nodded Elowen with earnest pride. Camden with the solemnity of a boy offering trust. Marin watched the whole exchange, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and tenderness. She had expected awkwardness. She had expected him to smile politely and divert his eyes. But this gentle acceptance, this quiet reverence for her children's small offering, she hadn't expected that at all. Something softened deep inside her, a place she had kept locked for years. She brushed her thumb against her lower lip, trying to steady herself. They don't usually connect with people this fast," she whispered, not quite trusting her voice. Rowan didn't look away from her. "Kids know good places," he said quietly. "Good people, too." Marin's eyes glistened not with sorrow this time, but with a kind of aching gratitude she wasn't ready to put into words. The children returned to their coloring, the moment settling gently over the booth like a blanket. Outside, the wind picked up, sending a swirl of leaves past the diner windows. The soft glow of the lights reflected faintly on Rowan's jacket, right over the pocket holding the small drawing, a weight he felt more deeply than he wanted to admit. He didn't understand exactly what was happening, but he knew something had shifted. And as the server brought their plates warm rolls, a shared bowl of soup for the kids, and a simple meal for Marin, Rowan felt a certainty forming low in his chest. Tonight was no accident. And neither was what came next. Because when the 4 of them stepped outside again, under the cool Vermont air, the night was holding something new in store, something that would turn all of their quiet lives just a little more toward the light. Morning came softly to Middlebury, sliding through the maple branches in long golden bands. The sunlight spilled across porches, old stone walls, and quiet neighborhood streets still wet with dew. That gentle New England mix of chimney smoke, fallen leaves, and something sweet from the bakery on Main Street, warm apples, cinnamon hung in the air. It was the kind of morning older Vermonters always said was good for the soul. Rowan stepped out of his house with a steaming travel mug, the porch boards creaking under him in the familiar way they had since his father built the place decades ago. He paused at the top step, letting the cool air wake him fully. His thoughts drifted back unbidden but welcome to the night before. Marin sitting on the sidewalk, Camden's shy smile, Eloin carefully offering the drawing, and the quiet way the four of them had walked to the diner, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Almost without thinking, Rowan brushed a hand over his jacket pocket. The folded drawing was still there. He didn't take it out, not yet, but knowing it was close warmed him more than the coffee. He walked down the street toward the town green, passing porches decorated with pumpkins and cornstalks. Banners waved gently overhead, announcing the Maple Hollow Fall Festival. Every year, families from nearby towns came for warm cider, folk music, hay bales, and handmade crafts. Rowan hadn't missed a festival since he was 10. He wasn't planning to stay long this year. Just pick up coffee beans, maybe a maple donut. But then, near the festival entrance, he saw two small figures he instantly recognized. A boy in a red flannel jacket clutching a painted wooden airplane. A little girl skipping along in butterfly sneakers. Camden and Eloin. Rowan slowed. A surprising bright warmth rose in his chest, stronger than he expected. The children spotted him first. Camden straightened as if seeing a familiar face in a crowd made him braver. Eloin stopped mid-hop, squinting up at Rowan with sleepy curiosity and the faintest spark of recognition. Then Marin came into view behind them. Her hair was loosely braided today, the kind of small change only someone paying attention would notice. She adjusted Eloin's hat gently, then lifted her head, and when she saw Rowan, surprise flickered across her expression. Not shock, not discomfort. Something closer to quiet relief. "Good morning," Rowan said, offering the kind of smile that only appeared when you were genuinely glad to see someone. Marin returned it, hesitant but real. "Morning. Didn't expect to run into you here. Festival tradition," he replied. "I come for the cider. And the donuts. Mostly the donuts." She let out a small laugh, the first one he'd heard that wasn't weighed by exhaustion. It settled softly in the space between them, warming something that had been cold too long. Camden stepped closer, holding out his wooden airplane. "We're going to paint pumpkins," he said proudly. "That so?" Rowan crouched a little to meet his eye level. "Hope you saved some good ones before the crowd got to them. They go fast." Eloin toddled to Rowan, stopping just short of touching him. She reached toward his coat pocket hesitant, testing the memory of last night. When her fingers brushed the folded paper inside, she looked up at him with a small, satisfied nod. Rowan's breath caught gentle and unexpected. Marin saw and blinked, her expression softening. "She remembers," she whispered. "So do I," Rowan answered quietly. A breeze swept across the green then, carrying laughter, fiddle music, and the smell of cider and cinnamon. People gathered around craft booths. Local farmers sold jars of honey, and a group of college students rehearsed a folk song near the gazebo. "The kids talked about you this morning," Marin said softly. "They wanted to come early, just in case." She paused. "In case we saw you again." Something steady unfurled in Rowan's chest. "I'm glad you did," he said. "If you don't mind the company, I could walk with you all." Marin opened her mouth, maybe to politely decline habit more than intention, but Camden tugged her sleeve. "Please, Mommy." Eloin nodded so seriously that Rowan had to bite back a smile. Marin's resistance quietly dissolved. "I'd like that," she said. And so the four of them walked unhurried, easy as if they'd been doing this for months instead of one night. They passed the cider stand, the pumpkin rows bright as tiny orange suns, and booths of homemade soap and local maple candy. Rowan bought 2 small cups of hot cider for the kids, blowing gently across the rims to cool them before handing them over. Camden giggled. Eloin drank hers with both hands, cheeks warm and pink. Marin thanked Rowan twice, genuine. Soft her voice, carrying a sincerity she rarely let others hear. When they reached the pumpkin painting tent, children were crowded around long tables covered with jars of paint. The sunlight filtered through orange canopies overhead, turning the whole tent into a warm, glowing lantern. Camden found a pumpkin nearly too big for him to carry. "I want mine to look like a dragon," he declared. Rowan chuckled. "A tall order, buddy, but we'll try." Eloan chose the tiniest pumpkin she could find, holding it close like a treasure before carefully setting it down. Her brushstrokes were slow, thoughtful little dots of yellow and soft pink. Maren watched, her shoulders relaxing more with each passing minute. The music, the crisp air, the presence of Rowan beside her, all of it seemed to ease something tight in her chest. "You're good with them," she murmured. Rowan shrugged lightly. "Kids just need someone who listens. A beat, same as the rest of us." Her expression softened, fragile, grateful. "Yesterday, I didn't expect any of this." He smiled. "Neither did I." They wandered through the festival afterward, past knitted scarf displays, past the woodcarver shaping owls from maple blocks, past the college choir warming up in soft harmony. Rowan bought the kids maple candies shaped like little leaves. Camden popped his into his mouth immediately. Eloan tucked hers carefully into her pocket, for later, as if saving a treasure. To anyone watching, the four of them looked like a family, enjoying a perfect fall morning. Maren felt the realization hit her, not painfully, but with a tenderness that surprised her. They stopped at a booth filled with children's artwork from local schools and community programs. Drawings fluttered from twine lines, bright and alive. "Oh," Maren whispered. "Camden, look." He rushed forward eagerly. "Do they have mine?" "They should," she said. "Your teacher said the college volunteers took it for the special exhibit." Rowan raised a brow. "You're an artist, Camden?" The boy nodded proudly. "Mom says I'm getting there." Rowan grinned. "I believe her." A volunteer pointed them toward the college gallery. Camden gasped and grabbed his mother's hand. "Mommy, it's in the gallery." Maren's eyes softened with awe. "Looks like it is, sweetheart." Rowan glanced at her, then toward the path lined with bright red and gold trees. "Should we go see it?" Maren inhaled slowly, her eyes warming. "Yes, I'd love that." The kids sprinted ahead beneath the arching maples. Their laughter carried on the breeze. Maren lifted her hand unconsciously to her heart. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel alone. Rowan walked beside her, not too close, not too far quiet, steady, present. And as they followed the children toward the college gallery, something gentle and certain settled inside the crisp Vermont air. Something neither of them had expected. Something that felt like the first small stitch of a new beginning. The walk toward Middlebury College wound gently beneath the tall sugar maples that lined the path, their fiery leaves scattered like little lanterns across the stones. Every gust of wind sent a swirl of amber and red dancing around their ankles. Camden hopped forward to chase the tumbling leaves, while Eloan reached out in quiet fascination, trying to catch one before it fell. The campus ahead rose in that classic New England way, brick buildings trimmed with white windows, ivy curling up their sides as if the walls were meant to hold stories from every decade they'd seen. Students moved here and there across the quad, laughing in small groups, carrying stacks of books, sipping warm drinks as the fall air settled deeper into the afternoon. Maren slowed as they approached the gallery building, her hand brushing lightly across the strap of her purse. Rowan noticed not hesitation, not fear, but a tenderness that came from realizing her children were stepping into a space she'd always admired from afar. "You doing all right?" he asked gently. She nodded, though her breath shook just slightly. "It's just, we never expected anything of his to end up in a place like this." She looked toward Camden with a soft, awed smile. "We walk past this campus all the time, but going inside for his artwork, it feels surreal." Rowan's smile warmed. "Feels like something he earned." Ahead of them, Camden nearly tripped as he hurried up the steps, overcome by excitement. Eloan toddled behind him, her butterfly sneakers pattering against the stone in a rhythm that made Rowan's chest warm. Inside, sunlight washed the lobby in gold. The tall windows made the gallery feel like a quiet sanctuary, soft, warm, a place where children's artwork mattered just as much as anything hanging in a prestigious museum. Hand-painted creations lined the walls, messy rainbows, bold strokes of color, masterpieces in the eyes of parents who hovered nearby, pointing proudly. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint, cedar from the frames, and the polished floor wax Rowan vaguely remembered from his school days. Something in that scent tugged at an old childhood memory, his mother leaning down to straighten his collar before a school showcase, her hand warm and gentle. A volunteer in a light blue festival shirt greeted them gently. "Children's showcase? What's your artist's name?" "Camden Whitlock," Maren said, her voice colored with timid pride. "Oh, Camden! He's in the next room." Really expressive piece, beautiful use of color. Camden puffed his chest so noticeably that even Aloan let out a tiny giggle. They moved into the adjoining room, a quieter space, as if the gallery itself understood this was where emotions needed room to breathe. Afternoon light spilled across the floor, creating soft rectangles of brightness beneath the paintings. Then Camden stopped. His breath caught. "There," he shouted. "That one's mine." He ran forward, stopping so close, his nose nearly touched the canvas. Bold green shapes stretched across the painting trees perhaps, and strokes of gold split the scene like sunlight peeking through a forest after rain. The colors were unrestrained, hopeful, alive. Rowan stepped closer, careful to give the boy space. "That's beautiful," he murmured. "Looks like a place where something good is waiting to happen." Camden grinned, cheeks pink with pride. "I wanted it to look happy. Mom says colors can make people feel things." "She's right," Rowan said softly. "And you did exactly that." Marin's hand rose to her mouth. Her eyes glistened, not with sadness, but with something fuller, deeper. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "He worked so hard on that, even when he thought no one cared." Rowan glanced at her, the way her breath trembled, the way her free hand pressed lightly against her heart. This moment, for her, wasn't just about a painting. It was about being reminded that her children still had places to shine, opportunities she feared she couldn't always give them. He didn't speak. The moment wasn't his to fill. A couple paused behind them, taking in Camden's painting with a soft hum of appreciation. "That one's lovely," the woman whispered. Then, more clearly, "What a sweet family." The words floated forward like a quiet breeze. Marin stiffened not out of discomfort, but because something fragile inside her recognized the truth she wasn't ready to name. Her fingers brushed her necklace, a small nervous habit she couldn't quite hide. Rowan hadn't heard it first, but when he turned to look at her, she was already looking at him. Not startled, not embarrassed, just seeing him. The room around them faded into a gentle hush. Light spilled across Camden's painting like a soft blessing. Rowan stood with his hands in his pockets, grounding the moment without forcing anything. Marin's breath caught, the kind that comes from feeling something you didn't expect but don't want to run from. Rowan didn't step closer. He didn't try to take her hand. He just stayed a steady presence beside a tired mother who, for the first time in a long while, didn't feel quite so alone. The children wandered to another table of artwork, and Rowan watched as Camden tugged his sleeve, eager to show more paintings. Elowen took Marin's hand, swinging it gently. And as the soft afternoon light settled over them, Rowan realized that something inside him, quiet and long dormant, had shifted. Not with fireworks, not with sudden certainty, but with a warm, steady truth. This moment mattered, more than he'd expected, more than he'd let himself hope for. And for the first time in a very long time, the idea of a future didn't feel empty. It felt like possibility. The afternoon light had softened into a warm gold by the time they stepped out of the gallery. The long day clung to them, in the gentlest way, warm breath of sunlight, maple leaves brushing across stone paths, the kind of calm that often comes after a moment that mattered. Camden and Elowen burst ahead with the last bit of energy they had left, racing across the lawn with the enthusiasm of children who hadn't had a reason to smile this big in a long time. Marin walked behind them, her pace slower, thoughtful. Something in her posture had changed since the night before. It wasn't the exhaustion he'd first seen, it was something lighter, something that hinted at a piece of herself she hadn't shown in years, finding room to breathe again. Rowan walked beside her in quiet companionship. Not the kind of silence that weighed heavy, but the kind that told her she didn't have to fill every moment with words to deserve someone's company. She glanced at Camden, who clutched his small gallery booklet proudly against his chest. "He hasn't stood that tall in months," she murmured. Not since before things fell apart." Rowan smiled softly. "He should be proud. He really should." Marin let out a small breath that wavered at the end. Not sadness, not relief, but something caught between the two. "Thank you for staying today, for being here the way you were." "You don't have to thank me," Rowan said. "I stayed because I wanted to." A few quiet steps passed between them. The sound of the festival floated from the green guitar strings, soft laughter, the clinking of cider mugs. A familiar comfort rose from the air. cinnamon, hay, the last sweetness of early autumn settling across the town. Eloan lifted her arms to be held, and Marin gathered her with a practiced tenderness. The little girl nuzzled into her mother's neck before opening one sleepy eye to make sure Rowan was still near. When she saw him, she relaxed again, her small body sinking into Marin's shoulder. Rowan's chest warmed unexpectedly. "You all hungry?" he asked, nodding toward the cluster of food tents. "Fall festival usually saves its best chili for last." "Chili!" Camden shouted, already halfway convinced. Marin laughed, a quiet, natural laugh that seemed to surprise even her. "I suppose that settles it." They weaved through the last of the festival crowds. Rowan bought 2 bowls for the kids, one mild, one with a gentle spice, and handed them over carefully. Marin accepted hers with a small, appreciative smile. They settled on a grassy patch near the maple-lined path. The sun dipped behind the trees, draping the ground in soft amber. Rowan stretched his legs and leaned back on his hands, watching Camden blow dramatically on his spoon to cool the chili. Eloan rested against Marin, her eyelids fluttering with sleep. It felt like one of those easy, unforgettable evenings parents talk about years later, simple, warm, full of quiet grace. After a long moment, Rowan spoke softly. "You're doing a beautiful job with them." Marin blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Some days I don't feel like I'm doing any job at all, just trying not to fall apart." Rowan turned slightly toward her. "You're not falling apart. You're doing what strong people do. You keep loving them, even when life gets heavy. That counts more than anyone realizes." Her breath trembled. "You talk like someone who knows what loss feels like." He looked out over the green as the light faded. "I do. But I also know what it's like to find something warm again, something you didn't expect." The words lingered, tender and honest. Marin's eyes softened, but before she could respond, Camden rushed toward her with a small maple candy. "Mommy, can I?" He stopped mid-sentence when her bag buzzed. The festival sound seemed to dissolve around them. Marin's expression tightened before she even reached for the phone, as though she already knew the name she'd see. She pulled it out. The screen lit with a familiar number. A familiar H. Grant. Her breath stalled in her chest. Rowan saw the fear return to her eyes, the old fear, the one etched from years of carrying too much alone. Eloan stirred restlessly. Camden's shoulders tensed. The phone buzzed again. "Marin?" Rowan whispered gently. She didn't answer. Not until it buzzed a third time. With a shaky breath, she lifted the phone to her ear, turning slightly so the kids wouldn't hear. "Hello?" A beat of silence. "Marin, it's me." Grant's smooth voice finally came through. "I've been thinking. It's time I saw the kids again." Her grip on the phone tightened. "Today? You haven't called in months." "I know," he said, "but I want to talk visitation. Being more involved." Marin shut her eyes tightly. The request wasn't the problem. The history was. Every promise broken. Every return that ended in disappointment for the children she fought so hard to protect. I need time to think," she whispered. "Don't take too long," he replied. The line went dead. She lowered the phone slowly, her hands shaking. The laughter and music from the festival felt distant now, like echoes from another world. Rowan leaned in gently. "You don't have to go through this alone." Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with the stunned exhaustion of someone who had been holding up a wall for years and suddenly felt the cracks widen. And then, without a word, Camden stepped closer and slipped his small hand into Rowan's. Not clinging, not asking, just quietly choosing him. Rowan looked down at the boy, then up at Marin, whose breath broke softly at the sight. And under the dimming Vermont sky, surrounded by fallen leaves and fading festival lights, Rowan understood that something had shifted in a deeper way than any of them expected. Not love. Not yet. But something steady. Something beginning. The festival had dwindled into a soft, peaceful quiet by the time they crossed the edge of the green. The late afternoon sun had slipped low enough to cast long amber bands through the maple branches overhead, catching on the scattered leaves that swirled along the path. A few vendors were still closing up their booths, folding quilts, stacking jars of preserves, sweeping fallen leaves from tabletops. The music had faded into something so gentle it blended with the breeze, hardly noticeable unless one stopped to listen. It was the kind of quiet that belonged to small towns at the end of a long, good day. Rowan walked slightly ahead, then slowed to match Marin's pace. Elowen slept against her mother's shoulder. One tiny hand curled into the collar of Marin's coat. Camden stayed close to Rowan, his fingers wrapped loosely around Rowan's hand with the kind of quiet trust that grows slowly over time, not all at once. The boy didn't look up at him often, but every few steps he gave Rowan's hand a small, almost imperceptible squeeze, as if checking to make sure the connection was still there. Marin kept her gaze ahead, but the weight of the phone call still lingered in her posture, tight across her shoulders, fragile in the way she exhaled. Her steps were steady, but Rowan could see the slight tremble in her breath, the flicker of fear that returned no matter how much she tried to push it down. "I'm sorry you saw that," she murmured at last. "I didn't want to ruin the day." Rowan shook his head, his voice steady. "You didn't ruin anything. Life shows up when it shows up, and you don't have to apologize for handling something hard." She breathed out a shaky sigh, the sound catching slightly. "Grant has a way of showing up at the worst times. Even when things are finally quiet, he finds a way to shake the ground under us." Rowan didn't respond right away. He let the silence stretch, respectful and gentle. It wasn't the kind of silence that demanded answers. It was the kind that allowed a person to breathe, the kind that signaled he wasn't going anywhere, no matter how heavy the moment got. As they approached a quiet corner of the green, Rowan motioned toward a weathered bench beneath a sprawling old maple tree. Its branches arched overhead like a canopy, leaves fluttering down in soft cascades. The bench was worn smooth by years of families sitting there during summer concerts, fall festivals, and winter tree-lighting nights. It felt fitting somehow, like a place meant for conversations that carried weight. "Sit for a bit," he said. "Just a moment to rest." Marin hesitated, but not to refuse. More like she needed permission to stop holding everything up. She eased down onto the bench, adjusting Elowen gently so the little girl's head rested comfortably against her chest. Camden joined her, but his eyes flicked toward Rowan every few seconds, as if reassuring himself that Rowan was still there. Still solid, still safe. "He wants to talk about visitation," Marin whispered. "He disappears for months at a time, and then, suddenly, he wants to be involved again." Her fingers twitched around the phone in her lap. "It's not even the request that scares me. It's the instability that always follows it." Rowan sat beside her, careful to leave just enough space, but not so much that she felt alone. "You've been carrying all the fear, all the decisions, all the responsibility on your own for years," he said gently. "Anyone would be shaken." Marin's eyes grew glassy, though she blinked quickly to keep the tears from spilling. "I'm so tired of feeling like the ground could fall out from under us at any moment." She pressed a soft kiss to Elowen's hair, steady and protective. "I'm tired of pretending I'm not scared." He nodded, his expression warm and steady. "You don't have to stand on that ground alone." The wind brushed through the branches above them, sending a handful of golden leaves tumbling toward their feet. Elowen stirred and lifted one sleepy hand, searching blindly. Rowan offered his fingers, and her tiny hand curled around them automatically before she drifted back to sleep. Something softened in Marin's face at the sight, not because Rowan had taken her place, but because he hadn't tried to. He simply filled the quiet, offering steadiness without stepping into territory she didn't invite him into. It was enough. More than enough. The sun lowered further, painting the sky with streaks of red and rose, the kind of twilight older Vermonters like to call day's goodnight kiss. Lanterns along Main Street flickered on one by one, casting warm circles of light across the pathway. A couple walked by with paper cups of cider, nodding politely. A golden retriever tugged at its leash, chasing leaves with lazy enthusiasm. Everything in the world seemed to slow and soften. For a while, none of them spoke. Rowan watched Camden trace patterns in the fallen leaves with his shoes, the boy's earlier joy dimming under the worry he didn't know how to name. Marin brushed a thumb over Elowen's small hand, her expression caught somewhere between fear and gratitude. Rowan quietly stretched his arm along the back of the bench, not touching her, simply making himself present in a way that wasn't intrusive. Finally, Marin drew a breath that trembled at the edges. "I don't know what happens next," she whispered. "With Grant, with all of this." "You don't have to know," Rowan said gently. "You just need to remember that you're not facing it alone anymore." Her eyes lifted slowly toward his, tired, hopeful, scared, grateful all at once. The vulnerability there was not weakness. It was the exhaustion of someone who'd carried too much weight for too long. "They need stability," she said softly. "They do," Rowan agreed. "And they already have it with you, Em." She looked away for a moment, letting his words settle. Then Rowan continued, careful, deliberate, not rushing anything. "And if you ever decided there was room for someone else who could be steady," his voice dropped to a quiet sincerity, "I'd like to be someone they can count on too." Man stille. Not startled, not refusing, just processing. Her gaze drifted from Camden, leaning against Rowan, to Elowen holding Rowan's fingers, to Rowan himself, who waited, without expectation. A minute passed, then another. Slowly, she shifted just a breath's width closer. It was small, subtle, but it wasn't an accident. Not a confession, not a promesse, but undeniably a beginning. Camden nudged closer to Rowan, leaning into his side with the familiar ease of a child learning what safety feels like. Elowen lifted her head briefly and reached toward Rowan again before settling back into sleep. Her tiny fingers brushed his wrist, and he felt something warm and steady unfurl in his chest. The kind of feeling that didn't flare at rooted. The evening wrapped around them like a soft quilt. Lantern light flickered across the grass. The first stars blinked awake through the deepening blue of the sky. Middlebury quieted around them, settling into its gentle New England night. A train horn drifted faintly across the valley. A neighbor's porch light clicked on. The slow rhythm of small-town life hummed around them, a reminder that sometimes healing didn't arrive in grand gestures but in quiet moments under a maple tree. And there, beneath its branches, with sleepy children curled between them and twilight holding its breath, 4 lives that had once felt separate rested together for the first time. Not as a family yet. Not fully. Not defined. But unmistakably, like people beginning to learn the shape of hope together. As the quiet evening settled over Middlebury, it was clear that something gentle yet powerful had taken root between Rowan, Marin, and the children, a kind of belonging that didn't arrive with fanfare, but with the steady grace of 2 hands finally finding warmth after a long winter. And sometimes, the most meaningful changes in our lives begin not with big decisions, but with small moments. A child's hand reaching out, a shared breath of understanding, or the simple courage to stay beside someone who's hurting. If this story touched your heart even a little, please type 1 in the comments. And if you feel something could be improved, don't hesitate to press 0. Your voice matters here. In the end, this tale of a mother trying her best, a man learning to open his heart again, and 2 children longing for steadiness reminds us of what truly lasts. Love, when it is quiet and patient, has the power to mend what life has broken. And kindness, especially the kind given without expecting anything back, can redirect the course of someone's future. Everyone deserves a place to belong, a hand to hold, and a home where they are welcomed not for perfection, but simply for being who they are. It's a truth as old as the front porches of small American towns. Just like the porch light that flickers on at dusk, one simple act of kindness can guide us through life's darkest paths. Many older folks will tell you that the most lasting gifts are the moments we share at a kitchen table, passing warm cornbread, or watching the grandkids chase fireflies in the backyard. Those are the threads that stitch a family together, blood or not. So as we close this story, maybe take a quiet moment for yourself. Think about the people who stood by you when life grew heavy, or the moments when you were someone's unexpected shelter. These memories, much like the golden leaves of a New England autumn, stay bright long after the season has passed. And if this journey left a gentle mark on your heart, feel free to share it with someone who might need a reminder that hope often arrives softly. If this story touched you, I'd be honored if you subscribed so we can keep sharing these heartwarming stories together. May peace, warmth, and steady light follow you wherever you go.